Takuya is our main kid for this season, and for the life of me, I think he's probably the least interesting. Or at the very least, the most forgettable, but we'll talk about all that later. First off, who is Takuya? Well, just to get right into the meat and potatoes of this, Takuya is pretty much a Tai clone. He's a generally nice kid, but as a leader he can be sometimes very brash, which gets the group into trouble. And it also leads to confrontations between him and the lone wolf character who's much more methodical in planning. Speaking of which, I mentioned before that what this season does kind of right is that it gives a lot of the characters individual and unique relationships with each other. Like I said before, Takuya is very similar to Tai in many respects, just like Koji is very similar to Matt. They have a rivalry, etc. But Takuya also has a second rivalry, this one between him and JP. Although this rivalry is kind of short-lived, and I think it's supposed to be comedic. I don't know, but him and JP spar in the beginning of the season because they both have different ideas about how they think they should travel through the digital world. Should they get involved in stuff? Should they not get involved in stuff? And also, they are in a battle over Zoe's affection. Yeah, Zoe's Takuya's love interest, I think. I'm not really sure. They have a couple moments, but they're more like comedic moments where it's like, oh, tee-hee, she's a girl and he's a boy. But nothing I would really say was building some sort of relationship between them. It just seemed like moments that were trying to be funny. Personally, the whole romance thing at the end of the Digimon fight just came out of nowhere for me. But I don't know, maybe it wasn't really a romance thing and her just, trying to be cute, like, tee-hee, if you win, I'm gonna take you out on a date. Tee-hee, here we are, out on the date, inside your coma dreams. Oh, you just want to sleep? Okay, wake up time. And I don't think it's seriously mentioned again. We might talk about this more later. I don't know. I don't think Takuya really had a big thing with Koichi. I think that was more of a Koji thing. But his big relationship for this season was easily with Tommy. The first big thing Takuya does upon entering the digital world is actually save Tommy from an evil Digimon. And from there they start building a sort of big brother, little brother relationship. And it works decently for this season. They have a couple moments together, like in the first episode I told you Takuya saves Tommy, and then like 2 episodes later Tommy risks his life to save Takuya. And then a couple episodes later, you could really start to see the relationship start to take hold, or at least just become more prevalent. There's one episode we're going to talk about in a little bit where you can really start to see it build. But this little character arc has 2 payoffs to it. The first comes when Takuya gets his Beast Spirit evolution, because as I mentioned before, Beast Spirit evolutions sometimes cause the person to go a little crazy, and it's up to him to internally take control of the spirit. But until then, you just go crazy and destroy everything. So Takuya's burning down an entire forest and just on a violent rampage, and Tommy here thinks that he has to try to stop him because he's got his own little, character arc thing about learning to stand up to bullies, and in his view, Takuya's acting like a real bully right now. So Tommy tries to confront him. It doesn't go so great. It looks like Tommy's about to be murdered right in front of everybody, but then he does the thing where he cries a tear onto him, and that makes Takuya realize that they're friends. And minus the cliche tear thing, I didn't mind this little character moment. And I like to see this season try to splice in and intertwine character development within members of the group. It's a good way to compensate for the loss of a Digimon partner who would usually play the role as confidant or personal character development tool or assistant. And that's kind of why I thought this season might work without Digimon partners if they just started intertwining all the characters. But it fails for a major reason that we're going to talk about in just a sec, but I gotta finish with Takuya here right now. Because after this first sort of resolve to what I guess you can call the big brother, little brother arc, we jump into a mini arc, which is pretty much just a Skull Greymon conflict. Yeah, they're doing it too. Tamers did it. I think Data Squad does it. It was such a good idea we had to use it 4 times. And it's just not very good here. It just feels like it's trying to be adventure again, and it just doesn't really work. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Frontier is the first season to do this, or even that I'm against seasons reusing ideas from past seasons. Tamers pulled the Skull Greymon crap too, and if you recall in my critique of that, I actually liked their interpretation of it. Like I said back then, I'm okay with you reusing ideas or scenarios as long as you do something to make it your own and improve upon its previous incarnation. Tamers made its incarnation a lot bigger and feeling more involved. You had Takada feeling guilty about his spontaneous anger turning Guillemon into a giant monster. You had Henry dealing with the guilt of allowing his kid sister to get caught up in all this and be put into danger. You had Beelzemon and his evil quest for power. And the whole thing was triggered by Beelzemon flat out murdering Jerry's Digimon partner, putting her into an emotionally catatonic state. And it's concluded with 2 very action-packed and well-drawn fights, with the world literally crumbling around them. It just felt a lot more dramatic and well thought out than the original Skull Greymon episode. So in order for Frontier to really go and make this season their own, they would have to either do 2 things. Either A, somehow become bigger and more epic and dramatic than Tamers, or take the whole event in a whole new direction. Maybe have Takuya's character take away a different message from the whole event, or at least put him in a different state of mind. But they don't do either. And it's super toned down. I mean, the trigger for this event is just this Shaman Digimon just explaining that, oh, you guys are going to be attacked soon, and you 2 are going to face a really big challenge that you're going to have to overcome. And then like 2 minutes later, guess what? They're attacked, and the Beast Spirit evolution shows up, and then Takuya fuses with it, and then Takuya and Tommy find themselves facing a challenge that they must overcome. And then after the whole thing, Takuya feels that he's let down the group as a leader and that he's a failure of a Digidestin, just like Tai thought. He's also afraid of Digivolving, just like Tai was. But then when his friends are threatened, he musters the courage to do the evolution and saves the day, just like Tai did. You know, if you're not going to try to one-up Tamers, you might as well just try to deviate a little bit from the normal script of these things. Like, instead of having Takuya do the whole moping, I'm the worst person ever routine, why not try taking it in a different direction and just have him believe he did nothing wrong? Like, after he gains control of the Beast Spirit, he just thinks there's nothing to fear about them, and that he's got nothing to fear with it. And that kind of makes the rest of the group uneasy about his leadership because they do fear that he might go crazy again. But Takuya would just try to rationalize everything, saying that that could never happen because Bokomon explained that as long as he remembers he has friends, then there would be no reason for him to lose control of his Beast Spirit evolution again. And that even though he did destroy a lot of property, it's not really that big a deal because it's all collateral damage in the long run of trying to save the world. And that would start planting seeds of doubt about Takuya's leadership. Now, I'm not saying that's a great take on this whole sort of situation, but it's something different. I mean, something big has to change with these sort of scenarios where they're obviously lifting from past seasons to prevent it from feeling like just a lazy ripoff. Speaking of scenarios that resemble adventure, let's talk about Takuya's trip to the real world. Yeah, this was kind of a tie-in to both his brother-like relationship with Tommy and his feelings that he may have been a failure of a leader. Because due to his hard-headedness, he basically almost gets everybody killed twice, leading unsuccessful attacks against Duskmon. He himself gets... Okay, I think they're implying he dies here, without specifically stating it. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff in this episode that feels like it's supposed to be left up to your imagination. And oh boy, is there a lot of weird stuff that doesn't get explained. Like, what is this evil train? Why did Takuya turn into a Digimon? How could he travel backwards in time? But, whatever. So yeah, Takuya dies and gets on this train that will take him back to the human world. And when he gets there, he realizes that he's been turned into a Digimon and, like I said, has gone back in time to right before he got the message to come to the digital world. And he devises this plan to stop himself in the past from getting on the train to go to the digital world because he feels that he is such a horrible leader that the group would be better off without him. Even though we know for a fact that if he wasn't there, Tommy and JP and Zoe would have all gotten killed by this evil dog thing, or Tommy would have fallen off the railroad thing to his death, and that the only person there who was capable of saving them was Takuya. So already I feel like this premise is stupid.